When the Oval Office lost control, power doesn't vanish all at once. It slips slowly, quietly, and by the time anyone admits it's happening, control is already harder to reclaim. The erosion is almost always invisible to those outside the system, and often difficult to acknowledge even for those within it. This story begins during a period when the Oval Office still looked strong from the outside. The machinery of government moved. Statements were issued. Orders were signed. Yet behind the scenes, something essential had weakened. The gap between the appearance of authority and the reality of authority had begun to widen in ways that only insiders could detect. Compliance was no longer automatic. To understand how the Oval Office lost control, we have to look past authority on paper and into authority in practice. The presidency depends not just on law, but on expectation, the belief that when the president decides, the system responds. That belief is the invisible infrastructure upon which every executive action ultimately rests. That belief was starting to crack. Advisors noticed it first. Requests took longer. Directives returned with questions. Agencies asked for clarification that had never been required before. None of it was defiance. It was hesitation, the most dangerous signal power can receive. Hesitation does not announce itself as resistance. It presents itself as process, as caution, as thoroughness. But its effect on authority is corrosive. At first, the administration treated it as noise, temporary confusion, political tension. But hesitation spread. Each delay encouraged the next. Each unanswered order weakened the next one issued. The pattern was self-reinforcing, because every instance of hesitation that went unchallenged communicated to the rest of the system that hesitation was acceptable. The Oval Office still spoke, but the echo wasn't the same. This wasn't rebellion. It was drift, authority dispersing into caution, interpretation, and selective compliance. Control didn't disappear, it fragmented. What had been a single, coherent force radiating outward from the presidency became a scattered collection of conditional responses, each one shaped by the individual calculations of the people and institutions receiving the directive. And once control fragments, leadership becomes reactive instead of directive. The presidency was still in command in name, but in reality, it was beginning to negotiate with its own system. That was the moment control started slipping, not loudly, not visibly, but unmistakably. And everything that followed would be shaped by whether the Oval Office could pull it back or whether the loss would become permanent. Inside the White House, concern turned into calculation. Advisors began mapping influence instead of authority. Who still listened immediately? Who delayed? Who quietly resisted by doing nothing at all? The shift from exercising power to monitoring its reception was itself a signal that the relationship between the presidency and the system had fundamentally changed. This was the first sign that control had shifted. Meetings grew longer. Language grew softer. Orders were no longer framed as directives, but as guidance. Each adjustment felt reasonable on its own. Together, they marked a retreat. The cumulative effect of these accommodations was a gradual redefinition of what presidential authority could realistically demand. The Oval Office tried to reassert momentum, a public statement here, a firm signal there. But credibility, once thinned, doesn't respond to volume. It responds to belief. And belief had begun to fracture across the system. Agencies started protecting themselves. Decisions were filtered through legal caution, political calculation, and institutional memory. Nobody wanted to be the one caught executing an order that might later be questioned. Delay became safety. Self-preservation replaced responsiveness, not out of disloyalty, but out of a rational assessment that compliance now carried risks it had not carried before. This created a dangerous loop. The more the system hesitated, the more the presidency compensated by consulting. The more it consulted, the less decisive appeared. And the less decisive appeared, the more hesitation spread. Control wasn't taken away. It was surrendered piece by piece. By the time the Oval Office recognized the pattern, reversing it required more than authority. It required trust, and trust is far harder to command than compliance. The presidency was learning an uncomfortable truth. Power doesn't collapse when it's challenged. It collapses when it's doubted. As the doubt spread, the The presidency found itself trapped between two risks: push harder and expose how much authority had already slipped, pull back and confirm that the system no longer needed to listen. Neither option was safe. Attempts to reassert control produced uneven results. Some departments complied immediately, eager to signal loyalty. Others moved slowly, citing process legality or uncertainty. The inconsistency was more damaging than open defiance. It revealed that power was no longer centralized. The varying responses made visible what had previously been hidden, that authority was now a matter of negotiation rather than command. Inside the Oval Office, frustration grew. The president still held the title, the mandate, the office itself. But power was now conditional, dependent on cooperation rather than command. This is the moment when leadership becomes reactive. Instead of shaping events, the presidency began responding to them, adjusting language, managing fallout, anticipating resistance before acting. Each calculation narrowed the range of possible action. The presidency, which is designed to lead from the front, found itself constantly looking over its shoulder. The system sensed it. Once hesitation is visible, it invites pressure. External actors tested boundaries. Allies hedged. Opponents pushed. Everyone waited to see where the real limits were. And the presidency couldn't show them, because revealing the limit would make it permanent. So control continued to diffuse, not through confrontation, but through accommodation. Authority adapted itself downward, trading certainty for survival. The Oval Office still mattered, but it no longer dominated the system it was meant to lead. And that shift, quiet, incremental, undeniable, set the stage for a final reckoning. One where the presidency would have to decide whether control could be reclaimed or whether this was simply the new reality. The reckoning never arrived as a single moment. There was no confrontation where control was clearly lost or regained. Instead, the presidency adjusted. Because it had to. Authority became selective. Power was applied where compliance was certain and avoided where resistance might expose weakness. The Oval Office learned to work around hesitation rather than challenge it directly. This selectivity was practical, but also communicated to the system that certain areas were beyond presidential reach, a concession that further defined the boundaries of diminished control. From the outside, this looked like adaptation, flexibility, political skill, and, in a sense, it was the system kept moving. Crises were managed. The presidency survived. But something fundamental had changed. Control was no longer assumed. It had to be negotiated. Every decision carried an unspoken calculation. Will this be followed, questioned, or ignored? That question now preceded action, shaping outcomes before they even began. This is how power erodes without ever being overthrown. Not through rebellion, not through force, but through doubt. The Oval Office didn't lose control in a dramatic fall. It lost it in fragments, each one small enough to rationalize, but together large enough to matter. And once authority becomes conditional, restoring it requires more than resolve. It requires belief, across institutions, across time, across moments that can't be rushed. That belief never fully returned. The presidency endured. The office remained. But control, once unquestioned, became something that had to be earned again and again. And history would remember this moment not as a collapse, but as the day power stopped being automatic. Subscribe to join the journey. When the